Hi and welcome. My name's Kit and I'm going to be taking you through a step-by-step guide, just a beginner's guide into making fermented sourdough. This is going to be my version, which is slightly different than you might find, but this is a no knead or a stretch and fold sourdough, which is great because I find kneading dough really messy. I get it all stuck in my arms, all over my hands and all over the work surface. It's really difficult to clean up because it dries like cement. The video is going to be around about half an hour long, and it's going to be just for a beginner to follow through the process. I find sometimes the ones on YouTube are a bit small and you haven't fully seen all of the small parts of how to make bread in detail. So it's going to be broken up into small sections, and you can skip through bits if you want to skip through bits, or if you're new, you might just want to watch the whole thing. It's going to be broken up into a mixing section, feeding of the starter. We're going to have 4 stretch and folds, and then there's going to be a little rundown on some equipment that you can use to improvise, or that I've used to improvise, because we're not all ready to commit and buy expensive Dutch ovens and bannetons, etc. And you don't need to be honest. So there's plenty of ways around things. And then there's going to be a final proving section, and then there's going to be a baking section. And then the eating, which is the best bit. So, the recipe. My recipe is 500 of flour, 300 water, 200 starter, and 9 grams of salt. And I also use sesame seeds on top of the bread, because if you haven't had sourdough with sesame seeds, you've not lived. So, I'm using 350 of white strong flour and 150 of wholemeal flour. So with the starter, if you don't have a starter, it's really easy to make. It's literally just fermented flour and water, and all you do is you mix flour and water together, put it on the work surface, leave it overnight, covered, and then feed it again, give it a bit more flour, a bit more water, and you do this for about a week, and then it will start bubbling up. And once it starts bubbling, that's it fermenting. But it's much easier if you know someone or a friend of yours who's making their sourdough. You could just take a bit of theirs and then maybe just watch my feeding section, and it's basically the same thing. So without further ado and without any more rambling by me, let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do is going to mix our flour into our bowl with our salt. Now I do this because I want to get the salt incorporated into the flour as much as possible and spread throughout the flour as possible, because salt and starter are not best friends. So salt will kill the starter and stop it from working so much. So the more you can mix it into the flour, the better. Now I've already measured out my 200 ml of starter, and what I'm going to do now is, a lot of people just put their starter into the flour, but I like to mix mine into my water. So I take 200 ml of water and 200 ml of starter and I mix them together, and I find that just helps incorporate the starter into the flour a lot easier. I find it much easier to get it right the way through the flour and evenly distributed as much as possible. Right, so once that's incorporated, mixed in, I'm going to start slowly mixing in small quantities into the flour. Not too anal about it. I just like to get it incorporated throughout as much as possible. So I'll just do it bit by bit. Now I've used the back of the wooden spoon because I just find it easier to get it through the flour. Spoon, and then I'm going to just mix in the other 100 ml into my jug, and this will help clean the jug, clean my spoon. Right. I'll mix that in at the end. Just mix all of this up now, and you'll see it quite quickly starts coming together. I like to cut through it and then stir and cut through. Now you can see it's all starting to come together, it's a bit flaky, and when I start putting this in, it'll all start coming together then. Right. So now it's starting to come together into one big ball, and it'll all start coming off the sides. So you can see how easy this is to get to bind together. This in itself can be quite difficult sometimes, so that's one of my biggest tips, is how you can kind of incorporate the starter into the flour ball as much as possible. Now one of the major points about making bread is to develop the gluten, and the gluten is what makes it stretchy. So all I'm going to do now is, this is where most people will take this out and start kneading it on the work surface. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you how not stretchy it is. So at the moment it just breaks apart. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for about 30 minutes, just covered with a cloth. I'm just going to cover it over with a cloth, and I'm not going to touch it for 30 minutes. And then when I come back, you'll see that that dough ball will have changed. It will become stretchy. So the gluten will already work itself. All you've got to do is give it some time. And I'll come back in 30 minutes and I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. So, as I said, I was going to guide you through my process. Now, this is still resting. This will be just sat here for 30 minutes, but in that 30-minute period of time, I have to also feed my starter, which is now, well, almost empty. I need to feed it so that it can grow for next week. What I'm going to do is just, I don't measure anything, like I literally just do it by feel. I just put in an amount of flour that I think is right until it comes up to the point where I'm used to it being in my jar, which is usually around about sort of this sort of area. So let me just put some flour in. I know a lot of people say you shouldn't use metal, but to be honest, I mean, it's just easier and it's never had any problems with me. So I just mix in some flour and water. I use the back of the spoon because it's easier. What I do then, I clean off my spoon, this one side, and now if I was at the sink I would use the tap, but I just use wet fingers and I just clean my jar, because I don't like crusty, it's not good to leave crusty flour on the side of your jar. So all I do is I clean it up. If I was doing it, if I wasn't doing this on a video, I would do this a lot cleaner, but I'm just going to quickly show you how to do it. I just clean around the edges and then I put the lid on loosely, just loosely, put the lid on, and then I stick it in the fridge. And that will stay in the fridge until next week, and when I come to make my bread next week, I just take it out and I start making the bread. There's no waiting for an hour, waiting for it to come to room temperature. I literally just take it out of the fridge and then I make dough straight away. And I'm sure there are other ways of making it, but this is how I make it, and it's worked for me, so hopefully it'll work for you too. Okay, so it's been about half an hour since I've left this covered after the first mix together. Now, just from leaving this in the bowl without doing anything to it, you can see it's already become stretchy. It's not perfect yet, but it has already started to become stretchy. So the gluten is already building. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'll just grab a bowl of water. Normally I'll just wet my hands, but bowl of water. All I do is have a wet hand. I scoop underneath the bowl. Just move this out of the way. Just scoop this underneath the bowl and underneath the dough, and then I just turn it over. And all I'm going to do then is I'm just going to pull up and then across. Pull up and then across. This is the first fold. We'll probably do about 3 or 4 of these over the next 3 hours, alright, or the next 2 hours. Fold in. And then as you'll see, as you move it faster, it becomes less sticky. so it becomes less sticky to the bowl and you can move it a lot easier. Now, from just having left it and then put it in the bowl, you can see that it's already come together as a nice dough ball. I've already got some gluten over the top, and this will become, you know, more glutinous and more stretchy over time. All I'm going to do is leave that there. I just tuck it in and then I cover it up, and we'll come back in another 30 minutes and then we'll do the next fold. Okay, so we've made it to the second fold. Let me just have a look, see what it looks like. It's been about 30 minutes. Hasn't been exactly 30 minutes, but like I say, it's not an exact science. It's just an amount of time that you wait before you do the next fold. As you pull in, what you're doing is you're also stretching this gluten over the top, and I will turn this over. So this is the top, and as I get it released from the bowl, I'm just going to pick it up and turn it over, and then I'm going to pick it up and start my stretch and folds. Now remember, the faster you work, the less it will stick to the bowl, and when it sticks to the bowl, you will tear the gluten over the top, so you don't really want it to stick. So it's just good to move the dough as fast as possible, and then get it released from the bowl and turn it over, and then all you've got then is a nice second fold completed, and it's starting to get a little bit more stretchy along the top, and that's it. In 30 minutes I'll come back for fold 3. Okay, welcome back. This is the third fold. So like I said, it would do, it is sunk down a bit, and we're just going to repeat what we did before. Right. So as you can see, it's only about 1.5 minutes every time we do this fold, so it's really not a problem to fit into your day. And like I say, it doesn't have to be every half an hour. Sometimes it's half an hour, sometimes it's 40 minutes. I've got to be honest, and I have done it every hour before and it still worked. Yeah, and it's fine. You just got to try and work the gluten, but gluten seems to work on its own quite happily. You don't need to keep stretching it all the time. It seems to work all the time on its own. So I've now taken that into a ball. I can already feel air bubbles starting to appear. I don't know if you can see this one here. It's just starting to appear here. I don't want any air bubbles just yet. And I'll just put it back in the bowl. A quick tuck underneath like I do before. I'll cover it over again. It's starting to get quite springy now, so I'll cover it over again and I'll be back in about 30 minutes. Okay, so we're back for the fourth fold. We'll just take the cloth off. Let's have a look. Right, so I'm just going to wet my hands. Just going to turn it over. So scoop underneath, turn it over, and we can start seeing some air bubbles starting to form along the top of the surface. So I'm going to turn that over. We're going to start the standard process of putting into the middle, turning quite quickly so that it doesn't stick, but it shouldn't. Then we're going to turn it over, and then we're ready. So now you can see bubbles starting to appear here, for example, and I can really feel how like there's a lot of air inside this already. I'm just going to put it back in the bowl and cover it up. And when I come back, I'm going to do the final prove, which will be 3 hours of proving, and then it will go into cook. Okay, so like everything in the world, there are multiple ways to do the next bit. You know, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. All we're doing is we're going to try and prove our bread, and then we're going to cook our bread, however we do that. Now, a lot of people don't have all of the utensils and tools that these professional bread makers have. So there are a couple of items you can use. One of them is a banneton like this that you can rise your bread in, and then you would then cook it in maybe a Dutch oven. But if you don't have a Dutch oven, which I don't, I'm going to cook mine into this baking tray. and all I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it with tin. I'm going to prove it in this banneting upside down, and then I'm going to turn it up, turn it out into this, and then I'm going to cover it with tin foil, and then I'm going to cook it. The other way of doing it is to prove it in something like a frying pan with a metal handle, and you can just flour the frying pan, and then you can just put the bread in with the top on top, rather than the opposite way round to this, where the top is underneath, the top will be on top, and then you just prove it in the frying pan. This is a very easy way of doing it. Prove it in the frying pan, cover it, and stick the whole frying pan in the oven, and that will cook just fine. This is how I used to do it for years, until my sister-in-law kindly gave me this for Christmas, which was epic. So I'm probably going to do 2 videos. I'm going to do one video where the end is going to be cooked in this one, and one video where the end is going to be cooked in the frying pan. So I'll start the prove next. Okay, welcome back. So I said before that I was going to try and make an alternative ending of the video using a frying pan, rather than tools that most people have. Most people have a frying pan. So here we go. So I'm just going to take the bread out of the bowl, just release it from the bottom. I'm going to do one quick last fold, and then turn it over. Give it a good tighten. So this one, how you can tighten this sometimes is just to turn the bread, the bowl underneath the bread, and that'll make a really tight ball. Just tuck it underneath. Now I need to flour the pan. Hands aren't sticky. So this is again rice flour. I get a good covering of rice flour on the pan. Now this does leave a load of flour on the underside of the bread, but it's much better than you can always scrape that off. It's fine. Just dust it off afterwards. Definitely don't want your bread to be sticky. And also the good thing is about rice flour is because people think that they have this gluten intolerance, but rice flour doesn't have that problem. So just take the water out of the way. Just going to take this out now, gently as possible. Slightly shape it in my hands, and then all I'm going to do is pop it in the middle. And that should be fine. Give it another quick dusting around the edges, on the top, and that's it. So I'm going to leave this covered for 3 hours. Now, because it's in a pan, I sometimes just use my bowl to cover it over the top, and then that's it. I'll see you in. This will be in here for 3 hours, and then we'll get around to cooking it. Okay, so the bread's out of the oven. It's been about 45 minutes in the oven, and I'm just going to turn it out of the pan. And as you can see, I've got a nice dark crispy top, and if I just turn it over, sometimes this will stick, but I actually know that this is actually released, but sometimes it's a little bit stuck to the pan, so you can just give it a sharp boom like this and it will release. Anyway, that's just a tip that I learned. Just turn it over, and you should see that we've got a nice crispy bottom, and then if I turn it around, you'll see I get these 2 little indentations, which is quite a cute little feature for the bread when we make it in a frying pan, which is quite nice. It's just something different. But anyway, yeah, that's it. Like I said before, this one isn't going to be for me. I've made this one for a neighbour, so I'm not going to open it up. But it will be the same as my last loaf of bread. So yeah. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting, and you've managed to find maybe something in the video that will help. Find a different technique, maybe speed up your process. But either way, I'm going to sign off, and I hope you enjoy making your bread the way you make your bread. Cheers.